I'm WG, and let's talk about the two biggest boosts to your deck strength that you can acquire during a Chaos run. And that is number one, the ability to remove cards, and number two, the ability to duplicate cards. So before we go into every character specifically and which card to remove, which card to duplicate, and information on top of that, we have to first talk about the basics. If you're confident enough with the basics, feel free to use the timestamps to jump to that section to the specific character. But for now, why would you even remove cards? By removing cards, you reduce the total deck pool. The smaller the deck pool, the higher the likelihood of you pulling into cards that help you during your turn, that accomplish whatever you want to accomplish with your turn, and in general it's just overall a higher chance of pulling into more impactful cards. Like if we remove a basic card from a Mika, then all of a sudden we have one less card we could potentially draw. So that is the benefit of removing cards. Now for duplicating cards, it is you finding really high impact cards and having them multiple times in your deck then also inadvertently allows you to pull these cards more often or even multiple times during the same turn. So how do you remove cards? The main way you remove cards is during a Chaos run. During a Chaos run or a Zero run, whatever you want to call it, you will have number one the option to always remove a card at a delaying shop, which is a rest area with the shop symbol, and there you'll be able to, in exchange for credits, remove a card of your choosing. So that is a possibility. Then we have way number two, during which you will encounter a certain event which allows you to remove a card. And then there's technically way number three, which is the ability to transform a certain card into another card through an event. Like for example, pick one card and transform it into the rare card Fluida from like the planet. So those are kind of like your three options. If you want to remove as many cards as possible, it can be wise to not either refresh for coins the shop at all, or to not buy any gear pieces or even potentially cards from the shop, so you can have as many credits as possible to do as many shop card deletions as possible, due to them increasing in price every time you do it. And then for duplication, you have two major ways. Number one is once you beat the interior or the exterior boss, the game will give you the option to duplicate any of three cards. Important to note here, the game will never offer to duplicate a basic card. So for example, if you use the remove function to remove an epiphany, that is one less card that could be one of the three. So then you beat the first boss, you get the option to duplicate a card, and you duplicate a card. Then you go into the interior, which is after beating the exterior boss, and during the interior you will have the chance to encounter a specific event that every single planet has, which allows you to, in exchange for taking curses into your deck, duplicate another card. What you can then do is either duplicate something else or duplicate the same thing that you already duplicated from the first boss, giving you already a total of 3 copies. And then obviously the last copy is after beating the final boss, you get this copy option one more time. Same rules as before apply, but if you've copied the same card that you already got from the first boss, you already have 3 copies of it, very much so increasing the likelihood of you getting the chance to copy it one more time, bringing you to 4 copies. So we'll be going combatant by combatant, talking about cards you could potentially remove, cards you want to keep, to give you an idea of what is and isn't good. If you don't want to watch it all, just jump to the characters that interest you. So here we go. For Luke, you have one main focus, and that is the rapid fire card. Not only does it deal damage, but it also gets a crit chance boost, and especially the moment you hit anywhere from 30 to 50% crit chance, depending on epiphany, you are guaranteed to get the extra effect of the bullet. Specific targets as well are either the retrieve copy, which allows you to use it twice during a fight until it loses the retrieve perk, or the best choice, which would be the rapid fire 3-hitter. So you want to get as many of these rapid fires as possible, because it's just one of the most reliable ways for him to get bullets, and that is kind of what you're looking for. Obviously, nothing stops you from, for example, copying a card like this, where you only need a 30% crit chance to get a 2 draw for a 1 cost. And then in general though, even if the rapid fire is not epiphanied, doubling or double cloning the rapid fire can help you in obtaining, for example, this epiphany, because you then have the chance to epiphany it twice. Other notable targets could be, for example, the stealth reload, like the get 2 bullets now, 2 bullets later, or the 3 bullets, or even the get 1 bullet at the start of a turn, because if you have 2 of those, you're guaranteed to get 2 bullets at the start of every turn. Or even if you want to go for more like a Luke burst comp, you could double the stealth reload, which could allow you to hypothetically get, already with just 1 card, 10 bullets in 1 turn. So it's rapid fire as the highest priority, then you have stealth reload, and then another good one can be the dance of the demon. So long as you have good bullet generation, having multiple of these finisher-esque cards increases the chances of not only you drawing bullet generation, but also the dance of the demon at the same time. But you can also more specifically use your supports or other characters to deck search for the dance of the demon, like the attack exclamation mark standard card. The attack exclamation mark standard card is, for example, something that allows you to pick any card from the draw pile. So if you have that on your support, you wouldn't need to clone that card as much. I guess then lastly, let's talk a bit about finish around. So the way finish around actually works is you only need to use 5 handgun bullets during the whole fight, and finish around will then turn into a 0 card cost that is available throughout the whole fight. You don't have to always shoot 5 bullets to use this, though this card has the unique tag, so it is, for example, not a clone target. So now that you know what you kind of want to look out for cloning wise, what would you remove out of a Luke's kit? The biggest and most obvious option to be removed is definitely the Shadow Concealment. If you get rid of the Shadow Concealment, you increase your chances of either drawing into his basic cards, which would give you bullet damage, or into any of his other cards. And then technically speaking, if you don't yet have like a higher evolved Luke or his partner, you could get rid of finish around. Because especially in short engaged fights, if you draw this round 1, you probably won't be able to use it. So Shadow Concealment is pretty obvious, whereas Finisher Round, it's a bit of a, you'll have to see. Alright, now for Khalipe, first off, which cards would I consider worth removing? So what you can remove is the Lashing. It is just a standard basic attack, it just does standard damage, and it doesn't even have the ability to trigger any of her Heaven cards, and the power of the upward slash at 212% or even at 200% just full on AoE is just too strong, so Lashing is something you can get rid of, and if you want to get rid of even more, then you can also get rid of the Tears Wow shield card. On the other hand, you could also potentially get rid of the Overpower card, but for that to make sense, you would kind of want to already have multiple copies of other cards in her deck. So the Overpower, like Lashing and Tears Woe, are kind of obvious, kind of easy, and then the Overpower is a bit of a, you'll just have to kind of see, whereas Greatsword Aquila, Rally, even Absolute Protection and Vulture Ejection are just strong in their own right, though then again, there can also be an argument made that should you already have enough shields, or should most of your key cards just have Retain anyway, Absolute Protection could also get sent away. So the main copy targets for a Khalipe are going to be either a Vulture Ejection, which allows you to just draw into more Vulture Ejections, the Greatsword Aquila, which can just be a very solid AoE option, especially if it gives you this upgrade in the middle right here, which has Silver Veil. So overall, the way Khalipe works is you shoot a bunch of these Vulture Ejections, you stack the Silver Veil debuff or buff, and every 3 times you stack it, you do like a big damage AoE hit. That is how Silver Veil works. You can kind of see it right here, 400% defense-based damage. So anything that stacks Silver Veil is to your advantage. So Vulture Ejection is probably priority number 1. Then if you happen to find the Silver Veil Greatsword Aquila sword, that one can be a good target. And then also the more Vulture Ejections you have, the more Rally can be useful, because you can then use Rally to deck search for the for the rocket launcher, for the Vulture launchers. Though here important to note is, if you don't have sufficient vulture ejections in your deck, you won't be able to pull anything, because the important part here is that this mainly only draws from the draw pile, and it can't get you back a vulture ejection if you've just used vulture ejection this turn. So that is Khalipe. So for Magna, you kind of have two options. Number one, you don't want to play it in any real offensive capability and you can just get rid of Frozen Fist. Or number two, you also start getting rid of the Frost Shields due to it being a pretty simple, oh, Frost Shield costs me 1, gives 100% shield, but what if I remove it and I just pull a Frost Charge instead, which also gives me 100 shield, but it does also apply the vulnerability. So it is kind of between these basic attacks. I don't think any of her cards are, you could say, bad enough to warrant you completely deleting them. So it is again really just between the basics. Now, on the note of which cards to clone for her, in general, I don't really think Magna is like the biggest clone target, but you can get incredibly big shields as well as some sweet damage by cloning yourself some more Glacial Fists. The Ice Wall, it depends, right? Especially if you have the upgrade, then you don't need the Glacial Wall to get the AoE counters, but just getting reliable AoE counters can be pretty good depending on which kind of planet you're facing. If you're just facing a planet with mostly single target, obviously you don't want to clone the AoE counter. And then the Frost Charge itself, I also don't really think it warrants you multi-cloning it. And this one with the lead ability, when gaining shield via an ability 1 counter attack, it depends, right? Obviously, if you find any of those, sure, you can really go for them, like for example the Glacial Fist or potentially the upgrade cards, though it's not as high a priority as other characters. Alright, now Rin time. So Rin has a very obvious card to remove, and that is the protection skill. It really isn't going to help you much, it doesn't bring value, and it just feels bad drawing into a protection when you're just looking to dish out damage. So protection is already a goner, and then the question is, what do you do with these basic attacks, because they do allow you to go into the stance. And one of the most obvious things is if for whatever reason you end up multi-cloning the Drawing Slash, or you're running a multi-copy of the Darkness Secret Art that just gives you more stances anyway, then you can just get rid of these basic cards. So you kind of always want to stay at around 3 to 4-ish triggers to be able to go into the darkness stance, so whenever you obtain a new trigger for the stance, you can then get rid of one of the base versions to trigger it. So depending on set choice, it could be either the Dark Sword third form or just the standard one, though I'm usually tending towards removing the 2-cost one when the chance shows itself. So for the Epiphany, for Rin, I really only have one card. My main card that I'm looking to clone on every single one of my Rin builds is the Darkness Secret Art Destruction. So even if you did or didn't know, what this actually says is whenever it mentions draw a card, it is always guaranteed to be a Rin card. So for example, the second Epiphany says draw one own card, you do that anyway. So the leftmost one is a 0-cost 2 Rin card draw with the shield, and this is a 2 dedicated move card. So the difference between draw and move is if you play a card in the same turn with move, you can still get it back on hand after you play it. With a draw, you wouldn't be able to do it. So for example, I use let's say the Darkness Secret Art Black Dance, then I can't draw it anymore, but with this beautiful Epiphany right here, I can still move it. So any version of the Darkness Secret Art Destruction is an absolute no-brainer duplication target, and then it really depends, because reliably with this one you can pretty much get as many copies of the other cards as you want, because you can just always draw them into your hand. I wouldn't ever advise to truly upgrade the Dark Mist Inner Art. Maybe, just maybe, if you have a Dark Mist Inner Art if in Dark Mist stance upgrade card, so that you get a 100% attack card bonus instead of just a 50% one. But even that, not really a good target. And then Dark Mist Secret Art Annihilation can be nice in, for example, if you get 2 different Epiphanies, like the all cards in hand -1 or any of the multi-hitter versions. And in general, kind of like the Dark Mist Secret Art Black Dance is more of like a finishing move that you just want to gain yourself. But overall, main priority is get yourself the destructions, and if you can't, either pick Annihilation or Black Dance, or even the Drawing Slash. The Drawing Slash has surprisingly good value in that it costs you nothing, gives you the stance, and has some pretty sweet upgrades, though I would kind of try to refrain from the no Dark Mist stance upgrade, because that can really cook you in the end. Alright, so for Orlea, your main removing targets, as sad as it sounds, even though during the potential you get the ability to potentially create a 1-star creation, you still want to get rid of Attack My Minions, and you can even get rid of Heaven's Healing due to you just having overall more powerful cards that could even heal at higher multipliers. So any of Orlea's basic cards are pretty good targets for you to get rid of. And that is pretty much that. Any of these other cards here, not necessarily. If you wanted to, you could go out of your way to delete an annoying, but it is truly a very big hitting card. So unless you play a super defensive Orlea that does 0 damage, I would still say annoying has enough value. So one of the more obvious ones should probably be the Sacred Sensor. The more Sacred Sensors you clone, the more creation cards you can go and you can get, and into the more creation cards you can ramp up into. Something important to note about the Growing Creature skill is if you retain this card, it only turns into 1 3-star creation. So you might want to even duplicate this Growing Creature so that you can get into 2 3-star creations rather than just a single one by retaining this card. Depending on if you run Orlea Beryl, duplicating the Will of Light can be very, very powerful. Like, for example, just envision a turn during which you have 5 retain cards in hand and you play 2 Wills of Light. All of a sudden you're getting 10 retain effects. You're pretty much simulating skipping 2 whole turns and getting all those retained benefits. So Will of Light definitely has the power here. And then depending on your epiphanies, growth acceleration can be good, though the focus should probably lie anywhere between Sacred Sensor and the Will of Light. Alright, so for Mei Lin there is one card that always needs to go. And that is the Flame Dragon Guardian. At the first opportunity, get rid of the Flame Dragon Guardian, and that is so that the unity of attack and defense is always guaranteed to just pull you strikes. You really don't want to pull a Flame Dragon Guardian and then end up with only 1 hit and the shield. You rather always want to get that double hit combo. So you always want to get rid of Flame Dragon Guardian, and getting rid of any of those strikes is just kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So I don't really recommend doing that. The Flame Dragon's Jewel can't be cloned anyway, unless you obviously go for this very specific epiphany, but I don't think that's actually worth it. And then, I mean, to be fair, if you had multiple copies of this, like, just think about the vision, okay? Let's say you have 4 copies of this. That means every time you break a target, you deal a 1200% hit. But you would also have to actually play this, which means if you wanted to play 4 of them turn 1, you need 8 AP. Have fun getting that. But no, the most obvious target, as it should have already become clear, is you want the unity of attack and defense. Specifically, you want 2 of these epiphanies. Number 1, you want the move card, which functions the same way as Rin, allowing you to get back strikes that you've played this turn with the move version. Or you want the create upgrade card, which pretty much for most fight durations just does a similar thing in that it just gives you 2 0-cost strikes, though these strikes don't disappear. They'll get back into your deck, so yes, it will stack your deck, but at least it will be 0-cost card. So if you have enough card draw, the create strike will still be fine. Outside of that, if you then have to pick something else just for the purpose of picking it, the plus 50% damage to the basic cards can also work quite well. So the unity of attack and defense should at minimum be your main focus. And then if that isn't possible, it probably turns out to be the Rising Dragon Spire, which is just a very solid follow-up after any amount of strikes. The Spirit of Aromata is kind of something you just hold on to anyway until you need it in a specific turn. And Flame Dragon's Sovereignty, it's just a good one-off card you can draw into, though it's also not the worst card to clone, but this is what you really are looking for. So for Veronica, what you can do again is you want to get rid of the shield card because it truly doesn't provide that much value. Like for example, you have a shield card, 102% shield, here you get the same shield but you also draw 2 cards for the same cost. And then due to the chance being that low, you can also start getting rid of these rapid fires, because who really wants to rely on a 1 in 5 chance to get an extra ballista, but they aren't super high priority on kind of like your removal list. It's when you kind of get to like your 3rd, 4th, 5th removal. So that is kind of what you want to get rid of. And then cards to copy on a Veronica are most likely probably going to be the repose card, because the repose card just offers incredible value, especially like for example here, a 0 cost draw 2 other combatant cards. It can just really help you cycle through your deck that much faster. This card can't be cloned anyway. Same with obviously the ballista variations. So then it's kind of between this Pendant of Resolution or Kowalski. So for the Pendant of Resolution, honestly, unless you're going for like a meme build where you have like a cost reduction on this one, you don't really want to clone the Pendant of Resolution. You're getting your reload through that most of the time, even at 1 copy. And then for Sir Kowalski, you're mainly looking for potentially the draw 2 variants that are then going to allow you to just draw more if you were to clone the Sir Kowalski. Now for Renoa, you can really get pretty much rid of any of these basic attacks, first shield, then any of the shots. They don't do much for you. You're never really going to be like, oh yes, I drew into an annihilation shot. That just doesn't happen. So the more of these you get rid of, the higher chance you have of pulling any of these high priority cards. And out of all of these, by far the strongest and what should be your priority is always to try to get as many copies of the Flower of Devoured Fate. The more Flower of Devoured Fates you have, the more bullets you can create, the more bullets you can discard, the more damage you can deal, and the faster you can scale. Specific ones aren't really a thing, because even if you, for example, clone the Flower of Devoured Fate before you get any epiphanies, you can play some really fun shenanigans, like for example, having one card give all Dirge Bullets retrieve, whereas the other one just creates a whole bunch of Dirge Bullets. So imagine just running these two together. This one gives you like 9 Dirge Bullets, where this one makes all of them gain retrieve, so every time you get rid of them they come back. So yeah, there is some incredible shenanigans. So the Flower of Devoured Fate is pretty much your card engine. And then for finishing moves, I don't really think there's much point in getting rid of the Last Ditch Effort or Last Ditch Assault, but it can help you, especially if you, for example, already somehow have a bunch of Flower of Devoured Fates. It can help you with discarding your like multi-turns. And then let's see, Ballad of Pitch Black. Not necessarily. It's kind of something that's pretty good if you have a one-off off and can provide value. Same with the Instant Judgment. And even this one, at the end of the turn, 200% extra attack to the enemies with the lowest HP. It is not worth it doubling this Instant Judgment. It doesn't really turn into anything too crazy. But what you could, for example, do is kind of treat this as like a mega bullet, because this now turns into another Dirge Bullet that can do some extra damage. It just isn't getting treated as such. So for Hugo, you can't quite see it here, but if you get the increased potential, you have a 50% chance to gain a Hunt Command stack with these daggers, which at least gives them some value in your decks. For the defense system, that is something you can absolutely get rid of. And then obviously with the Fixer's approach not being clonable, your main goal is to just find a way to either increase your card draw or to just gain more commands of the hunt stacks. But for Hugo, it's more of a, does your team have enough attacks for him to even need multiple of these sources? And depending on that, you could, for example, go for a Outbreak of the Hunt clone card, or even something like a multiple fans of daggers. Though in general, Hugo I don't think has any like super high priority picks that should need to instantly be cloned upon sight. Though let me know down in the comments below if you think there's something I've missed. Alrighty, so for Haru, you want to get rid of the anchor drop as soon as possible. Both anchor and power anchor still have value in that they increase your anchor shot damage, which is your main damage card, your main damage engine. Though, especially towards the end of a run, you could also think about, let's say, getting rid of like the anchor or the power anchor, because you don't necessarily need them as much anymore. overall, there is one primary copy target for the anchor shot, and that is the anchor pointer. So if you get multiple anchor shots, yes, that increases your chance of drawing into an anchor shot, but it is very limited because you mostly will only have one or maybe two per turn. But if you clone anchor pointer, you can treat one anchor as infinite anchors, because the more anchor pointers you have, the more times you can get the anchor shot back. And even if you had, for example, 2 anchor shots, you could use 1 anchor shot and then the other. But if you have an anchor pointer on hand, you can use the anchor shot, pull it back and use it again. More importantly, also this card has a 0 cost, and there can be some very, very juicy divine epiphanies, as well as, honestly, all of these cards just tend to be pretty damn good. Like from draw pile or graveyard, move anchor shot to hand, grant that card, retain. Like any of these anchor pointer copies are pretty much your go-to target. But if you cannot clone an anchor pointer and you want to clone a card regardless, it's probably going to be between the anchor shot or the power anchor if you're looking for more AoE damage. Charge anchor is something, the same way with lift anchor, is just something that you're going to basically hold onto until the turn you need it. You're never really gonna want to play multiple of this during a turn anyway, so anchor pointer is your primary target, and then I guess anchor shots or any of the other cards, but they aren't nearly as impactful. Alright, now for Kayron, honestly, Kayron is the most complex in what you can and can't clone and what you should and shouldn't clone. And that is due to all his cards really having that much synergy between each other, like how every one of his basic cards can allow you to stack futilities, so especially without having like these multi-copy futilities or even epiphanies that give you, let's say, more futilities. You kind of still want to keep the basic cards. In general though, you could, if you wanted to get rid of one, probably get rid of the heal card instead of the attack cards, because usually your futilities will have an heal aspect to it anyway, and there's only so much you can heal. And then general copy targets, it really depends on your playstyle. Like for example, right here, the Oath of Vanity skill, which allows you to exhaust all your futilities. This is something you could clone. Obviously, cloning any of the other versions isn't nearly as powerful, right? But if you have this Oath of Vanity, cloning this one can be a possibility to just heavily get rid of any futilities. The black hole could either be something you deck search for like kind of your big one-hit finisher, or something you want to draw into multiple times, because it scales with the number of exhaustive futilities. So then you have 2 cards that scale at the same time instead of just one single one. So the black hole is a really good option. The Brand of Annihilation kind of goes the same thing. If you have the ability to multi-deck search, or if you reliably are able to exhaust a certain number each turn, getting any of these copies just makes your life that much easier, reducing the cost by the number of exhaustive utilities. For example, you could have 2 0-cost 500% hitters. And then also you have the Echo of Futility, which could be a good copy target, because it either is super cheap and gives utilities and scales, this one is really good, or you have your famed X card, which you can use with the X equipment, that just gives you a whole bunch of futilities, or even the middle one, which gives you futilities that just disappear on your on their own without you having to play them, or even just creating 3 futilities at the cost of 1. And then, for example, if you have a E1 Kayron, getting a double 5 futility creation card can also be pretty powerful. So for Nia's potential, you can see that she has this therapy buff, which gives you elasticity. Elasticity allows you to heal every time an ally performs an extra attack, and this can stack up to twice, and you trigger this by actually using her healing cards, so that adds extra value to the therapy and makes the choice of what needs to go first quite obvious, in that you want to first get rid of the stroke. Then it depends on how you want to play your Nia. There are so many different ways, but overall the ability to for example get rid of 1 or 2 further therapies can just overall increase your deck's power. Now there's a bunch of cards you could think about that are pretty damn good in a Nia's deck, and one of the prime clone targets could, for example, be Nia's Curiosity, which you can pretty much treat as a 0-cost Cassius Joker-ish equivalent, and that is every time you have this card in hand, it allows you to pick 3 from your draw pile and kind of swap this card out for a different card at a 0 cost. Obviously, if you have her at the first copy, otherwise at a 1 cost, it is definitely a bit weaker. So if you only have a 1 cost Near Curiosity, I don't really think it is that good of a copy target. Other potential targets might include something like the G card, allowing you to multi-trigger cards at cost, or especially if you get like a sweet epiphany on there, or even something like this, which allows you to multi-play should you get your hands on enough decibels. And then potentially any of these other ones, though more epiphany specific. Nia is someone that does offer quite a bit of freedom, I think, in which cards you can and can't clone. Like, for example, how these adagios not do all, they don't really do similar things. So yeah, Nia's Curiosity is a pretty simple pick, and any of these others kinda are a bit more epiphany dependent. So for Selena, the cards you want to get rid of are most likely just going to be the emergency shielding, due to the engagement fire, also with the potential upgrade getting the ability to penetrate shields, changing the damage type to piercing damage. But even then, it is still not the most impactful thing in the world, so after emergency shielding you can put your eyes on the engagement fires. Potential copy targets could, for example, be the high power scope, just a reliable way to apply mark, or even to increase your mark damage for 1 turn, due to you mainly playing around with this mark debuff. Obviously you can't clone the sniper's domain, but if you could, that would be a prime target for sure. Some other cards that could be fun are, for example, the tactical maneuver and the ability to remove quite a bit of tenacity bar, or even this card right here, which allows you to have a response effect. Response effect is when you draw this card, though for this response effect to be truly worth it, you either obviously activate this effect if you pull it out of your deck, which can, for example, mean that if you draw this card at the beginning of your turn, you're just going to have a 6 card hand instead of just a 5 card hand, or even you could deck search for this card specifically to then as well trigger the get drawn effect. Otherwise, maybe if you want to go farming, you could go for the AoE section, but I do feel like her kit is pretty solid as mostly a one-off scenario. So for Tressa, you can try and get rid of the Touch of Darkness, due to after potential having the ability to apply agony with the dagger throw, though the further you go into the fight you can also start getting rid of more dagger throws, because overall you will be able to apply more agony just through your other cards here without having to rely on a basic attack to give you that effect. And then honestly, on the note of cloning, or duplicating targets, definitely the Shadow Reload upgrade card with the Outbreak of War. When healed by a skill card, create 1 Shadow Dagger is definitely up there, especially if you have multiple of these, like let's say for example up to 4, then every time you get healed you get 4 Shadow Daggers at 0 cost for free that you can then use to apply agony to get these attacks out. So that can be quite powerful. Honestly, the multi-Shadow Dagger reload, it just, I think, feels better as a one-off card. This one specific Shadow Reload is pretty damn good. Getting multiple copies of Unsheathed Dagger just can be a solid way to obtain more daggers, due to it being one of your main ways of getting daggers, like the ability to get 3 or 2 at 0 cost. Cloning the Exhaust card for 4, it depends on kind of like the fight length you're getting into, I guess. Vital Attack itself is more of like a finishing move, so you don't really need multiple of it, and for 1 turn when using attack cards, apply agony or anything like that. Honestly, it's also, I think, better off as just a one-off card, with specifically Shadow Reload being one of your main targets here. And I don't really think, I mean, I guess it depends, right? If you're having a whole bunch of hits, potentially having multiple Cursed Gouges can help you massively stack the amount of agonies, though, yeah, that's kind of that. So for Amir, a card you could be getting rid of is the rapier attacks. And the reason why is the rapier attacks, they don't do a lot of damage. They are just one cost and they don't do anything. Whereas, for example, the steel barrier gets, through the potential, the ability to give you more metalize. Amir truly is all about that metalize buff. And the more metalize you have, the more extra attacks you can trigger should you gain shield from different sources. So having the steel barrier in here is quite crucial. So for copy targets for Amir, I would probably say hovering meta and meta extraction are kind of like your main breadwinners due to the ability to just give you more metalize stacks, and metalize is just at the end of the day the key mechanic of Amir. Multiple iron skins won't really help you, especially because you could, for example, very quickly burn through your metalization stacks, and the full metal hurricane is also kind of probably better off as just like a one-off. But especially if you have like a purpose in mind, maybe getting multiple full metal hurricanes could be advised. Though I think it is best you pick between any of these two metalization options. So for Lucas, same with Luke, you can get rid of the shielding incendiary bomb due to the machine guns getting the bullet tech upon you potentialing the unit, allowing you to have more synergy with other bullet related characters and overall obviously with your own kind of kit. So the machine guns can stay, but especially if you get multiple copies of multiple other bullet sources and the like, then getting rid of the machine guns is something you can do towards the end of your run. Now, fun targets to copy for Luke, it kind of depends. Like, for example, you could just straight up copy the extended magazine to get to get multiple copies of bullets, everything a single turn. Though I feel like you might be running a bit out of AP unless you, for example, have him on E6 where your first launched bullet costs one less, so you can pretty much play one for free, which would then make sense to have two extended magazines. The flamethrower can be quite good in allowing you to draw and discard cards, but probably if you're playing a Lucas, which is maybe the only real T-comp I would see him in at the moment, then getting multiple RPG 7s can be really useful if you stack this when a bullet is exhausted, 50% fixed damage, up and up and up. Every single bullet you shoot is just going to become more valuable. So for example, if you have 3 RPG 7s, then all of a sudden every single bullet that you discard, or better said play and exhaust, is now going to deal 150% fixed damage. So the fact that this isn't unique kind of should tell you that this might just be your target. So that is kind of that. So it's anywhere between bullets, card draw, or bullet exhaust damage. Outside of that, if you find an epiphany that you think is like incredibly useful for one of your runs, obviously go out of your way and pick that one. Though I feel like these 3 kinda might just be the prime targets, or maybe not even the flamethrower, because while he does do good AoE damage, it's not the craziest card draw, and you could potentially even think about getting rid of something like the flashbang or the flamethrower with a card removal. So for Maribell, you can get rid of the Shelter Kick due to the Shelter Defense and Shelter Hold, both gaining the ability to give you a stack of counterattack and just overall being pretty solid cards in their shields. Or maybe you could get rid of the Shelter Defense because it's just a pretty straightforward 100% for one shield card. And then on the note of cards to duplicate, there's a couple options, right? Like for example, if you get a good epiphany, especially something godly for the Wolfstorm, maybe even the Outbreak of War, you can get a ridiculous amount of counters in a ridiculously short amount of time. Like for example, if you have 2 of those, then you could get, for example, 4 counterattack turn 1, and then at the start of every turn 2 counterattacks. Or even kind of like a, you could say Magna case, in that you could get yourself a good amount of damage, especially against also shielded targets due to the pulverized tag, a good amount of damage and a good amount of shield as kinda like payback. On the note of the OIC card, I guess it depends, right? At the end of the turn, fixed damage equal to 50% of shield onto the enemy with the lowest HP could go up to 100, 150 if you clone this one, and obviously they don't really want you to they don't really want you to clone this card. It has a unique tag, so that is unfortunately a forlorn dream. Now our all-time crowd favorite, Mika. So your first target to get rid of is Water Arrow. You truly don't need that on Mika. She barely does any damage, especially if you build her in a defense direction. So getting rid of Water Arrow first is pretty damn good. And then Whirlpool. Fuck Whirlpool. Get rid of Whirlpool. It's one of the worst cards because your Mika doesn't really heal, doesn't really hit. And because she doesn't really hit hard, this card also doesn't really heal. Overall, one of the epiphanies you could be going for and justifying to some degree is the 1-cost Whirlpool, because at least if there's 3 enemies it pays for itself, but if there aren't 3 enemies then you're still taking a loss on Whirlpool. So Whirlpool is just a no-brainer to always get rid of. And then there is a couple people that like to get rid of Deluge so long as you don't have a E6 Mika, and the reason for that is most of the time you aren't playing a boss fight. Most of the time you're ending your fights within 2, 3, 4 turns. And then having a Deluge that you play for 1 cost turn 1 that only gives you 1 wave, and then it takes 2 further turns, so up until into turn 3 for it to even just pay for itself. It just doesn't really feel as good. So pretty much the moral of the story is, so long as you don't have an E6 Mika, you can consider getting rid of the Deluge after you get rid of Water Arrow and Whirlpool. Now, cards to clone on a Mika is pretty much going to be your Source of Water. Source of Water is just a very powerful card, especially with, for example, certain Divine Epiphanies giving you the ability to draw, or the like, or even this Exhaust, which can then just give you a big bump in AP. So the Source of Water is always a good choice, though I tend to find myself more often copying cards for a DPS rather than for a support, because they're just more impactful. And then Tactical Analysis is also a decent target, but usually only if you already have like a Godly Epiphany on it that gives you 1 AP, that draws you 1, and specifically at least if it has like a 2-wave modifier. So any of these 2 would be a good choice. This one not as much because it's an upgrade card, so you can only play it once. So any of these 2 Tactical Analysis are kind of like your main goals here. So for Beryl, it all starts with getting rid of Barrier, and then if you can still, you might just be getting rid of, for example, Launcher or the Charge Launcher. They just do damage, they don't do anything else like that. So if you have the removes after the Barrier, you can then start getting rid of a Charge Launcher or the Launcher. And that is then pretty much that. It is pretty straightforward. Any other of her kit cards, they do have enough value for you to continue using them. And then there is a couple very specific targets, like for example, duplicating a Guilty Pleasure always gives you good value, no matter which epiphany you have, no matter what the card itself does. It's just a bunch of card draw for very, very cheap. So Guilty Pleasure can always be a good target. Charged Shot can also be quite well, but keep in mind you have the ability to create opening founds and charge shots, so you don't even need to duplicate a charge shot. You can just create it with the Heavy Weapon Specialist, which also means Heavy Weapon Specialist is a decent target, though also going around one of the premier choices, or one of the premier Beryl decks is having multiple copies of the opening found. So what that means is the more cards you have in your hand, the more cards you retain, the more this triggers at the end of your turn. So if you have, for example, 4 copies of opening found, and then you retain 3 cards at the end of your turn, that's already 12 shots, right? And also this is one of those cards that you really want to run together with Orlea for that massive retain big damage synergy. So opening found specifically in that one upgrade card, and then otherwise, usually you end up kind of with Guilty Pleasure, or potentially even the Happy Weapons Specialist, due to it giving you, 0 cost card versions, or you could even, I guess, find yourself copying the 0 cost cards, though, it's not really, that's not really it, right? But yeah, it's mainly Guilty Pleasure or that one specific opening found. Alright, so for Big Boy Cassius, if you're a man of the gamble, a man of the chance, you can keep the cards and wild card in there, specifically just because it costs so much. Unless you're running like a Celestial heavy card deck, you could get rid of the wild card, because a 1-cost card with a 30% chance to draw 1 is definitely better than a 2-cost card with a 30% chance to draw 1. And then there is no real point in copying the quest card, because you can only have one quest card at a time, or like one quest active at a time. Copying the devil dice can be quite fun, especially with, for example, the 0 cost draw 1 epiphany, or even with like a godly epiphany that allows you to reduce the cost to 0, like for example this one. If you have this at 0 cost, draw 2, discard 2, deal damage, can be quite nasty. Though, yeah, it's Joker, right? Especially once you get his first copy, you can use this card to pick a card from pretty much anywhere. You can get it into your hand, you can search for a win condition, and having this multiple Joker cards in your deck can always just mainly be beneficial. The dice trick is more of a one-off card. I don't really think there's much point in copying it, though I guess maybe the upgraded version or any of these right here, but not necessarily. So then you have Shuffle. So Shuffle allows you to discard all cards in hand and draw as many as the number discarded. Shuffle can be another good target that allows you to mill your hand, to repeat your hand, especially if you have multiple versions of like these discard cards in here. But what can also be quite good is the move all cards from hand and discard to draw pile, then draw 5. What this does, it does a deck shuffle. So for example, if you shuffle your deck, that means you're basically discarding your whole deck. If you discard your whole deck, you're triggering any dirge bullets from a Renoa that are in there. You trigger the deck shuffle effect from a Nia. So for example, Nia Cassius together with this shuffle card can do some funny shenanigans. So always keep an eye out for this specific version. Having multiple of that just allows you to pull off these discard shenanigans multiple times. So for Owen, if you treat him as a DPS, getting rid of the weapon block is just something pretty straightforward. The downward cut gets a damage upgrade of plus 30% from the potential, but it's also not your main priority. So any of these basic cards can pretty much be cut off quite reliably. And then you could, whoopsie daisy right here. You could, for example, see yourself multi-cloning the wind riding, because the wind riding allows you to get the wind charge back. So you could then kind of start stacking these extra hits to the next attack card used. And that could, for example, work together with someone like a Haru, who just has like a big hit, and then adding multiple hits to that can be quite fun. Outside of that, he's more of a bruiser. He has more of like a well-rounded kit. And I don't think there's anything too specific that you want to go for. But yeah, the wind riding is kind of like the bread and butter of your Owen, and then potentially any of these cards are more like one-off cards that benefit from wind charges or wind riding, as well as like, for example, the Gale Strike. It's just a big damage, big shield. Alright, now for Rey, if you're wondering what the hell you're just reading there, that's just them swapping the numbers. It actually deals 114% damage and has a 15% crit chance, not 15 damage at 114% crit chance. It's just swap numbers. But on the note of swap numbers, what you can start to get rid of with the Rey, it kind of depends, right? There's a couple ways you can play it. There's a couple ways you can deal with this. Like, for example, how the Strike of Darkness just empowers the damage of your basic attacks. But if you're not really relying on the Strike of Darkness, then you can start, for example, getting rid of the Dark Blades. You could also consider getting rid of the Material Regeneration, because you do have the ability to, for example, heal through Snack Time. So any of these 3 basics can go, and then depending on the situation, you could also, for example, get rid of a Strike of Darkness if you're not using as many basic attack cards anyway, and this kind of elite thing is kind of pissing you off a little. This card obviously, it's just pretty good, but if for whatever reason you're never playing anything with 1 cost or lower, or you're not playing any void cards, then why are we playing Rey in the first place? And yeah, that brings us to which are obviously here the copy targets. So there's some funny shenanigans, but overall the biggest no-brainer of them all is to always go for Snack Time. Snack Time is a 0 cost with a 1 exhaust, meaning you can get rid of debuffs, you can get rid of annoying cards, you can thin your deck. Like, for example, if you exhaust a basic attack from a Mika with the Snack Time, you won't be able to pull it during the fight again. So not only can you thin your deck, but you can also then replace the card by drawing one. Other options here that are also fantastic are like, for example, the draw 2 or the select up to 2 to exhaust, draw that many, or even the specific deck search, which goes really, really well with the Kayron, because it's a total of 3 exhaust, which makes his like upon exhaust a 0 cost card. So Snack Time is your pretty much go-to favorite, and then there's some funny shenanigans like, for example, duplicating Dark Condensation, the upgrade card, which could allow you to stack up to a 100% permanent damage bonus on one specific attack card for the whole duration of the fight. But outside of that, I mean, yeah, obviously this one can't be cloned. You could try something here, but this doesn't have Retain, nor does it have like Outbreak of War, so reliably pulling into this card can be quite tricky. And yeah, I feel like the Predator's Blade is also just better as a one-off. Does a solid amount of damage, gives you an 80% damage bonus for the rest of the turn. Overall, it truly is most likely going to be Snack Time unless you have a specific plan. So, this was every single character in the game, which cards to remove, which cards to clone. I hope you were able to learn something, hope you were able to take something away from this. As always, a subscription or whatever the hell would be greatly appreciated, and we see each other in the next one. Peace.